Our third talk will be by Scott Cole, who's an associate professor in psychology at York St. John University. So thank you so much for joining us, and feel free to share your screen.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to give my presentation, and yeah, thank you for coming to listen to it as well. And it seems like I look forward to having some discussions afterwards and hearing what you think. So I'm going to talk about an area which I'm quite excited about moving into, which is an area of not just thinking of the future, but thinking of a collective future, which with the current news and the current trajectory of many countries and global situations and conflicts, I think is quite relevant. And it's an area that I'm quite interested in applying some of the things I've learned from future thinking to this idea of collective. So I'll move into that and also talk about virtual reality and how that might be used. Okay. So I want to first just it's quite an interdisciplinary group. So I think I just wanted to kind of set the context of how we study imagining the future in our small area of psychology. It is studied in other areas as well, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that. Give some rationale for the studies and sort of the way we want to look at that in the next few years, and then talk about the plans that I have, a bit of my own future thinking about what I plan to do in the residency coming up. So how do psychologists sort of conceptualize the past and the future? So quite a well-established model. There's several people came from kind of the 1990s have looked at past and future thinking in terms of a sort of hierarchy. So you have this level of specificity. So if I give you an example, you might think of different periods of time in your past. So you might think of a time when you're at university, this general period when you're with a certain set of friends, and within that you would meet those friends regularly at the same bar. And then one particular time you might have a specific event that's quite memorable of your friend James coming in, walking down some stairs with about 8 drinks and spilling them all in one go, and yeah, like creating a bit of chaos. So this is quite a memorable event that you've kind of got in your mind, and then you've got the similar kind of way we've thought about the future. So we kind of think that there's a way that we assemble lots of sort of similar kind of events within a general concept or a general timeline, a period of time. So this could be when you become a grandparent in the future, for example, and you might imagine as a grandparent you're going to see your son regularly, and things like that, and then you might and seeing the grandson, then you might have this specific imagined event when they turn one, and you go to their birthday party. So these are sort of the sort of way we conceptualize it, and generally psychologists ask people for this very specific type here. We don't generally ask for these more longer periods. We ask for either specific events in the past or specific events that plausibly could happen and that are quite novel. So things that you haven't thought of before that are quite plausible. So that's generally what people have done. And they've come up with this phrase called mental time travel to illustrate that although time generally flows forward from past to the future, we have this ability in the mind to sometimes travel backwards, travel forwards, and also Tolving, who was the guy that sort of came up with this psychologist, he came up with this and he sort of said, yes, this suggests that maybe there's a thing in the human mind that allows us to bend time and to kind of re-experience things or pre-experience them. And that maybe separates us from other non-human animals. And so just to give you a sense of how there's lots of uses for this in daily life, the future thinking. Just to give you one brief example of how it could be quite important. So say if you've got like a future goal in mind of you've got a goal of succeeding at this job interview, and you've maybe it's a job at Google or something, and yes, you get this amazing job that's very well paid, but you've got these barriers towards that goal. You've got stumbling blocks. You've got other plans. So maybe a friend asks you to go on a trip before that interview, but then if you go on that trip, you're probably likely to not really focus on the job interview. You may well fail. You may well feel some kind of imagined regret. So maybe you decide to just not refuse to go on that trip and stay at home and start studying about the company. So this is quite useful in everyday life. So mental time travel, yeah, it's this idea, it's kind of theoretically grounded in this idea that we have this ability to travel, to have this kind of consciousness where we can travel to the past and travel to the future. And that's why they call it kind of pre-experiencing. So you can kind of get a sense of things before they happen. And there was a lot of scientific research in this from 2007 that showed that there's very, very similar brain areas involved in both of these processes, past and future, and certain clinical disorders such as dementia seem to impact both in quite a similar way. So my work so far has really looked at variety of things, and I've always sort of focused since my PhD on looking at how people imagine the future. I've asked older people, younger people, etc. I've generally found that people who remember the past in really exceptional detail tend to do so for the future. Found that sort of older adults produced more general, factual details, contextual details compared to younger adults. I've done a few studies with people with brain damage, case studies and case series, finding that certain brain areas seem to affect both. And we've had a couple of theoretical papers looking at, suggesting that the healthy way of thinking is reflected in basically an effective or beneficial way of future thinking. So a future thinking that benefits you in your daily life. So the opposite is true of depression, where you have kind of these ineffective future thoughts that they say that are kind of self-defeating, that and stop you from doing things, and indicate a non-healthy way of thinking. And then you have future thinking, which is generally it's been studied in a way where we ask people, as I say, we ask people in the lab to imagine a variety of different situations in the future that might be weeks or months or even sort of decades in the future. But we've actually done some work finding that people have quite a lot of spontaneous thoughts sort of regularly throughout the day about the future. And these are generally around plans that people want to do in the upcoming days, which obviously makes sense that we do things in a spontaneous way. It's easier, more effortless. So my current interest, building on all this stuff, is thinking about, can we use, maybe we've got all this information about autobiographical, sort of self-based future thinking, but humans, can they also imagine collective events? They can remember maybe collective events, but can they also imagine collective events? And so starting off with a sort of definition of what I mean here. So a collective memory, as many of you might be aware, it's a sort of memory that transcends individuals. There's various definitions. It doesn't necessitate that you are in the situation. So someone could have a collective memory of the Second World War, for example. You don't have to have been in the Second World War. It's a shared memory across a group, and it's generally linked with the group's identity, collective identity. And you've also got recently, in actually just 2016, people were establishing this idea of collective future thinking, which is the act of imagining an event that has yet to transpire on behalf of or by a group. So yeah, again, there's various ways you can conceive this, but it's an agreed future of a certain group, or linked to a future thought that's linked to a certain group. And a group that has been studied in almost all of the studies is the nation. So that's what we're going to focus on. It's the most common one, but you could look at it in terms of even a family would be conceived as a group in this way. So I just want to give you an example of one study just in a few minutes, just to give you a sense of kind of how I got involved in this. And it all sort of stemmed from COVID, essentially. So in COVID, we asked people from 15 different countries to remember and imagine with reference to the nation. And it was actually a Facebook post in 2020. And lots of people responded. We ended up with people from lots of countries, not representative of the whole globe, but we had a good representation from Europe, from some countries in Asia, and in the States. But obviously there were some parts that were neglected. But this was very much a time we had to do things very quickly, move quickly to find out how people remembered and imagined in relation to COVID. So just to briefly say what we did, we asked people about past global events. So can you think of things that happened in the world since the disease first appeared in Wuhan? Can you think of things that happened in your own country since the disease appeared in Wuhan? Can you think of things that expect to occur in the world and things that you expect to occur in your country? And just to give you a sense of the data, so we measured these things. I'm going to talk about the descriptions briefly. And what we found is obviously there are lots of COVID-related events, and I think this feeds into the idea that the past and future is linked. So the way we remember the past is used as a way to project ourselves into possible future events. But there are some differences. So even in the past collective events, so in the global ones and in the national ones, we see that lots of people, obviously, since if they're asked to think about things that happened since the first case in Wuhan, they were talking about lockdown, they were talking about infections, they were talking about closures. And when there was obviously similar things in the future. So when we looked at the future, we asked them about what they thought would happen in the future. Quite a few people said there's going to be a second wave of a pandemic, either in their country or in the world. And lots of people were linking the pandemic with things like the economy, which was a big thing, as probably you'll remember at the time, and also thinking about the future of lockdowns in the country as well. So this people were thinking ahead. So there's some links between past and future thinking, and there's some differences, but these can exist in a collective way. So we're asking people about a collective group, how you see your country in the future. And since this research, there's been a raft of different studies, even some really general articles, really saying that this could be a real way that psychologists could contribute to the way that there is quite an unstable way that we see the collective future at the minute. Various conflicts and climate change and issues like this that are affecting many collective aspects, and to understand how we perceive the future could be really useful. So just got like a few slides here just to kind of summarize where the issues are. So I mean, I've looked at all of the studies of collective future thinking, and there's not so many, so it's quite a new area. And the big issue at the moment is that these studies largely focus on what questions. So they largely focus on themes across the past and themes of the future. in exactly the same way that I've showed you. This is a problem of our study as well. However, we can't really offer any theoretical insights with this kind of data. We can't look at how people generate collective future thoughts, which would be really interesting. For example, the role of emotion. So the how question is actually critical. It's actually really important, and it's in terms of psychology, it's one of the big ones we want to always find out to predict how people are going to be in the future. So one solution is to examine how people engage in personal and collective mental time travel in the lab using scientific methods that can establish how people construct these. So I'm going to look at virtual reality, which comes in a variety of different types. But here we're going to use a headset-based immersive 3D environment. And I'm going to show you a quick clip so you get a sense of it. I know that we're probably lacking a bit of time, but just to give you a sense of this. You may not have sound, I'm not sure, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you should have sound.
In the memory, cognition, and brain laboratory, we use virtual reality to reproduce the conditions in which memory is expressed in everyday life in an experimental setting. On the one hand, virtual reality allows us to control the environments in which the participants evolve, thus determining what they will memorize in advance. On the other hand, the participants can be put in original situations that could be impossible to simulate without this tool. It is in this context that the Temporality Project was born.
Okay, so this highlights a really nice aspect, which is you can control the environment. This is one of the real benefits of this method. So virtual reality has been used in the past to look at, for example, negative, neutral, and positive environments, and to look at how that predicts what people remember. So here you've got like a burning bin for negative. You've got like people kissing romantically in Paris as positive. And these were looking at sort of different kinds of events and how that would predict how people remembered them. But what about future thinking? So one of the things I would like to do in the residency is to try to summarize how virtual reality could be used to look at this idea of future thinking, to look at collective future thinking, to look at other kinds of future plans and how we interact with the world and how we plan for the future, to explore how future thoughts are actually changeable. Can we change future thoughts by using virtual reality? And as I say, like how can we better plan for future acts and perform better within our tasks? We also have an empirical project, so we're going to use some headsets, it's a virtual reality headset to, hello? We're going to use some virtual reality headsets just to develop a virtual environment which will represent the UK in 2060. The environment will be based on predictions from our young participants who have predicted what it might be like in the future in 2060. So we're going to construct some positive, some negative, and some neutral UK scenarios of the future. And we're going to see how that affects people's collective and personal future thoughts. And this is the general timeline. I'm just sort of coming to the end now, just the last couple of slides, I promise. So this is my sort of timeline of what to work on and to build these studies, working with the university, City University Paris laboratories, and then eventually carrying out these in York. So this is an image that was created by AI, which, similar to the one we're thinking of, will involve lots of drones. But they put like a Union Jack there for some reason. So AI's view of the future might be slightly different. We're going to ask people and base it on their own views of the collective future. So virtual reality offers a new way for psychologists and others to change perceptions of the future. We have yet to work that out, but we think that's the case. It offers a change from previous research, which relied on individuals' memory and imaginations, and it creates an opportunity to control aspects of an environment. I intend to look back at VR research and to look forward of how it can be applied fruitfully, and this could address in some small way some critical issues that are on the horizon, such as climate change, conflicts, and pollution. So yeah, that's all from me. I'd just like to thank a few people and thank the IAS.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Sadie.
Thank you very much, Scott, for this presentation, and it's a fascinating avenue to explore this. It's not a question. It's just we've been working with people with a subcam, that is miniature video camera that records first-person perspective what they're doing. So I don't know if there's something you can use out of this, but so when they look back at the tapes, right?
Yeah.
Have a very good access to episodic memory, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we've been doing debriefs where they look at the tape and we ask them what were their mental states, etc. And so an interesting thing for you is that the quality of remembrance varies very much whether there is movement or not. I mean, episodic memory, of course, is multimodal, but when people move around and manipulate stuff, they're able to remember very accurately things like even weeks after the fact. Well, when we're asking them about sessions where they were just like doing something at the computer, the decrease of the memory is much quicker. So whatever you're doing for future simulation, it's probably very different if they can move around and manipulate stuff or not. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Thanks, Sadi. So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're not planning on this first study to look at active sort of interacting with the environment. And unfortunately, that's just not going to be possible for this round. But yeah, I think that probably links in with things around these sort of goal-related ideas about memory, right? Like that, if you're completing a goal and you've completed that or you've made that action, you can kind of understand that and consolidate it in your memory as that, okay, I've done that action. And obviously you have the bodily aspects of that as well. Yeah.
Well, actually, what stayed for the when they were not mobile was precisely the goal. They remembered if they had, finished properly the task or not. But it seems that if there's, physical movement,
yeah,
the embodiment is a different nature somehow, and so we had richer access to the memory and longer remnants. Just yeah.
No, it's really
what to do with it. But,
no, it's really interesting, and we can definitely think about this as we go through the project. I mean, I think what they're going to do in the virtual reality is just walk around a small city, which could be of Paris or it could be of York or UK. So just walking around it, that's all we've got at the minute. But I think, yeah, we're not going to really attack that issue, but we're going to look at things around the sort of nature of the environment, I guess, and how, and then what we're going to do after that is ask them about their futures. So completely unrelated. Okay, tell us about what you're going to do in a year's time, and see if these environments subtly affect, and what the research is showing at the moment. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's showing that most people have a very negative view of their country at the minute. I mean, that's not going to be shocking. But almost all countries have the trajectory is going down. So from the past to the future, it's getting worse. However, people have a very positive view of their own lives in the future. So that's what we're going to try to see how they both link, these collective and personal. But thank you.
Great. Marco, next.
Yes. Thank you so much, Scott. This was really exciting. And I actually share that I've been been increasingly more interested in these topics from a physics perspective myself. And I have actually 3 questions. One is provocative. And so the first is, do you have any evidence that the people for which we have seen a strengthening of past thinking is also improving and strengthening future thinking and vice versa? So first point is whether you see any form of, from maybe some other works result, describing causality in strengthening one type of thinking towards the other. First point. The second question, I was wondering, as for the collective thinking and collective future thinking, I'm wondering whether maybe the next step would be to explore whether an increase in collective future thinking have an impact on present actions. present collective actions, because that would be also very interesting to explore, I guess. And the third, more provocative point is, to what extent do you think past and future thinking can be strengthened? Because suppose, let's have this mental thought in which we can strengthen past and future thinking indefinitely. Well, then can this challenge the very concept and way we perceive time? Because of course, if we think of this extreme case in which past and future thinking can be just like strengthened indefinitely, then time doesn't exist, or it exists in a completely different way, the way we experience it. And so, yeah, these were my questions. But
okay. I feel like I should be a philosopher to answer the third one, but I'll give it a go maybe. But the first question, yes, there have been some experiments from Harvard looking at how you use practice bringing back memories, specific memories, and you practice and bring back these details, and that makes people make much more specific, stronger, more detailed views of the future. So there's a bit of causality there. There's also, in terms of causality, you've got the brain damage cases. Some people who once had very strong links between past and future, once the episodic memory goes due to encephalitis or dementia, their future goes. It's a really dramatic thing. It's just like goes down to zero essentially. So there's a really clear link that we know between past and future. And there's some patients I've looked at that even you can see some of their memory problems make the future different and extreme, strange, and they suddenly say they're going to go to the moon, things like this, because they can't reason. The content of the future changes essentially. Collective action, yes, there's evidence for that. So there's lots of really interesting studies by a social psychologist, Bain and colleagues, and they'll say when you frame the future slightly differently, so you maybe make things closer to the present, talk about pollution or climate change, it can change people's actions, that they're going to intend to give more money to, climate charities and things like this. But there should be more, I think. There's a little bit of research, mainly social psychology. Cognitive psychology hasn't got really on board yet, but hopefully I can do a bit of that. But yeah, there's a bit on, and climate, like more sociology and things around this, and they've looked at how people see the future of society and things like this. So there's a bit of research on that dotted around. And then in terms of your time question, I don't know. I'll think about it and I'll email you. It's a really big question. I don't know. It feels too big to handle on a Friday afternoon. But I'll try to make some invoice. Thank you, Marco.
You can keep discussing that as well. Chiara, next.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I was wondering if you are going to consider all the elements that actually interfere in virtual reality experiences, not augmented reality, but virtual reality.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to talk about an immersive experience, a full immersive in virtual reality. So just wondering.
What do you mean? What kind of things do you think about when they all interrupt that experience?
But even just the headset that you wear, or the feedback effect of the materials with which you interact when you are moving, just in the short clip you showed us. All the virtual reality sickness, for example, or the weight of the headset, once again, or the fact that light enters. I mean, all the material constraints that have an enormous impact on virtual reality experiences.
Yeah.
And habituation is another one, because the first time that you have any kind of virtual reality experience, there is the wow effect somehow. But the second or the third or the fourth time, you can have a kind of you can experience strangeness, but your arousal is much, much, much lower than during the first experience.
Yeah.
So arousal can be, of course, positive or negative, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So your involvement change a lot given the time that you spend in the virtual reality situation. So how do you think to manage all this variability, which is quite unpredictable?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what we plan to do is not only look at what happens in the period after they have these scenarios in virtual reality, but after each individual virtual reality scenario, we're going to ask them about presence, about their feeling of that particular scenario. There are some measures of kind of how people feel like they're actually in the environment that are standardized. We've got, the sickness, virtual reality sickness. We've got measures of this, and we're going to monitor it throughout that stage. But of course, we know that this is not a reality, right? This is a version of some constructions, and the way I see it is like extending beyond where we would show it on a screen. Now we're showing it on a 3D scenario, but it's not going to be, it's going to be somewhat representative of real life, but we know that it's not going to be. There's going to be all these things that disrupt it. We also obviously we ask participants at the end open questions, and we always try to do this. And we're going to try and do this about the experience they've got, and maybe we can extend that to more questions based on this.
Yeah, my point, it wasn't that it's not real reality. I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But that this kind of reality there are a lot of rumors, if you want, and it's very difficult to predict them. And if you want to make any kind of research, you have to manage some kind of predictability.
Yeah, I think we could take them all on board. I get what you're saying, and also the extent to which people are used to virtual reality and habituated, I think, is a really big one. So we will always measure all of these things, and they come with some limitations. But I think, keeping them, in our minds would be really, really helpful. So thank you.
We have 5 minutes left for this section. I have Pavo next.
Hey, thanks. That was really interesting. I'm sorry if I have another kind of more boring methodological question. Maybe we can follow up at lunch later, but I'm curious whether you know work in this field that gets at how realistic, I mean, it's kind of building on the previous question, like how realistic the virtual reality is and how much of an impact, how the impact changes. Because, so I do some survey research on people's attitudes towards new housing development near them, for example. And so, early work in this area would just tell people that, oh, there's going to be a new building built down the street. Like, how mad does that make you? Then people started getting at more kind of accurate descriptions, some pictures, getting, a picture of the block this person lives on, and then really sticking the building in that specific context. And so that we found it changes a little bit how people respond. So I don't know what this kind of spectrum of the correlation between how real and the impact is.
So thank you for that, Pavo, for that question. So we're really interested in making it as relevant to people as possible, to the context in which they think is going to be in the future. So, we've even explored in the Paris example that's already been created of 2060. They were the students were thinking about Bitcoin will be the thing. And so they have posters of Bitcoin in the environment. We had these questions about like robots, or how robots would assist older people, and they are also in there. So I think what the key thing is we want to try to make this specific to people's views of the future, not just sort of assume they're going to be a certain way. So all of these virtual environments are going to be tailored to what we've found people think is going to happen in the future.
But you might actually
that might be inaccurate, but
but you might make on purpose some grossly inaccurate ones, just to see how that what the differential effect is.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Err on purpose,
and see how that affects response.
And see how if that's different. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's something I've thought about doing.
Okay.
Because you can't make it more accurate than you can't make it actually accurate because you don't know the future, but you can make it obviously inaccurate.
Yeah, Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we have a couple of minutes left for
Yeah,
that question.
very quickly, very general question. I mean, are you somehow interested also in the reason why people and society forget,
Yes.
and what's the effect of forgetting also?
Yes. Yes.
And if I understand you, you refer to memory basically as a cognitive phenomena, but do you take in account also the emotional and affective aspects, which also I think cause some problems in the difference between real experience and virtual experience? And finally, what about different levels of consciousness? I mean, you can people and maybe also society, I don't know, can forget but still have an hidden memory. What about that?
That's really interesting. Yeah, so just briefly then, in terms of forgetting, there's some studies that look at things called collective silence. So these gaps that we have in our conversations could relate to stigma around certain things, right? So this was looked at recently in terms of COVID and pandemic.
Yeah.
And
For example, I have the impression that we are forgetting COVID or de-emotionalizing the experience of COVID.
In fact, we did a follow-up of this study with COVID, and we found that it may be to do with the fact that there is now a war in, Ukraine, and there's other things in collective conversations, but we definitely found people are forgetting about the COVID quite a lot. They didn't report it as much. And they even found that about the previous pandemics, right? People didn't think about the Spanish flu, and there was this kind of forgetting of what happened there collectively. And why that happens is perhaps could be looked at, but why is perhaps because people don't change. People have reverted back. That's one theory. It hasn't changed the nature of how we live in terms of everyday life. The effective aspects of that is I'm trying to think back to your question now. So that I guess that point relates to the hidden memory, and that there are ways in which we do things which we don't consciously bring back. And maybe the gaps are really interesting in that, like why we don't mention these things, but they still might have an effect. Not mentioning it might have quite a big effect. And then the effective aspects of the real and the virtual. So I was thinking of, if you think of lockdown, or even conflicts, we've done a study in Ukraine, and everybody's got this flashbulb memory in Ukraine of when the first day of the war, and that's highly affective, right? Highly emotional. So we are considering that, obviously, but how you can recreate that is, I think, is a really big question. Yeah, in virtual reality, I don't think we can ever recreate this kind of event. But thank you. That's really interesting, David.
Great. Thank you very much. Good. We are just in time for our next speaker. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.